Hello and welcome to the first episode of Losing the Plot, where I examine the narrative of a game through a critical lens to check the health of modern narratives. As this series will be delving in and examining stories in depth, it will of course feature spoilers. In this episode, the Uncharted series will be massively spoiled, so best get on with playing that first if you don't want to know what happens. If you don't care, or you're already familiar with the stories, then we'll begin. Relationships in video games aren't typically great. For years, the main reason for the existence of many wives, girlfriends and other, usually female love interests was a prize to be won at the end of the game, or someone to kill off to kick off a damaged man's roaring rampage of revenge. The number of games which feature damsels in distress or fridged women is countless, and it's kind of a warped view of relationships as a whole. RPGs have tried to address this by making romantic relationships part of the gameplay, with potential partners existing among NPCs, and the ability to woo them and get that all-important fade to black that means some possible sexing is going down. But this isn't much better. These romance quests are little more than checkboxes that break romantic relationships into a series of rote tasks that must be completed with the reward of being a boob, or a dong, or whatever paraphernalia exists within your chosen partner's undergarments. Again, it's not a great start for representing relationships in games. The truth is, relationships aren't just about the courting. They're not just about having someone to rescue or protect. They certainly don't exist as motivations for trained assassins to do work for exposure. Real relationships are two personalities existing in one space, occasionally clashing but mainly blending together. There's compromise, there's hardship, but there's support, and there's a feeling of working together to make something work together. A good relationship is a literal marriage of equals, and anyone who tells you otherwise is probably trying to get you to pay a dating app subscription or get you to buy their books and attend their seminars. Video games are getting better at this, with the indie scene producing a range of titles that focus on relationships. They're still few and far between, and you really do have to look for them. So where on earth can you find a good relationship in a video game? One that demonstrates the real struggles and the joys of being part of a couple. One that falls apart but then pieces back together in a realistic human way. Surprisingly, the answer lies in a AAA platform exclusive game made with a huge budget. And that game is Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. It might seem odd that one of the best written relationships in games came from the pulpy Indiana Jones riffing treasure hunting series, but it does. At the core of the games is Nathan Drake, adventurer and lovable rogue. By Uncharted 4, he's married to Elena Fisher, a no-nonsense globe-trotting journalist. And while the plot of the game carries threads involving 16th century pirates and Nate reuniting with a long-lost brother who totally wasn't retconned into existence, another plot thread concerns the relationship between Nate and Elena. At the start of the game, they're living in wedded bliss, doing honest work and playing Crash Bandicoot. And then Sam arrives, and Nate lies about heading off on an adventure with him. It's a conflicted decision as he's torn between honouring his marital agreements and helping out the brother who's been lost to him for years. Naturally, he's found out, and this generates conflict that the couple must work out to achieve their happy ending. But this relationship story doesn't exist in a vacuum. In fact, it's set up throughout the Uncharted series, and in order to understand the couple in the fourth game, we must understand them in the games that came before. Elena and Nate first meet in Drake's Fortune, where she is the lead journalist on a show that focuses on adventure and archaeology. Elena sees the discovery of Francis Drake's coffin to be a great episode for her show, while Drake sees her show as a great opportunity to get money for his own needs. In fact, Drake is shown to be a downright asshole throughout the game, with their relationship being a rocky one. However, we also get plenty of evidence that Elena is more capable than Drake sometimes appears to think. He abandons her at a dock on the instruction of Sully, although she manages to trace them both in pursuit of her story. After the two crash on the main island of the story, they get separated, prompting Drake to launch a rescue mission to help the poor damsel in distress, only to discover that she doesn't really need his help and ends up needing to be rescued by her instead.
Well, come on!
While she does end up damseled a little bit towards the end of the game, she does aid in her own rescue and does what she can to fight back when she can. The adventure brings the two of them together, which Sully notes,
"You two got a funny idea of romantic."
What the story shows is an oaf who sees this young, attractive blonde as a helpless little girl he needs to keep out of the dangerous stuff. Meanwhile, she makes it very clear that she likes the dangerous stuff and is perfectly capable in her own right. And yet, the two manage to fall for each other after some bonding.
That somebody special?
What? Oh. Yeah. I guess you could say that.
Huh. I had you pegged as more of a woman in every port kind of guy.
Don't I wish?
But as much of the first game draws from the usual pulp adventure genre, it's not entirely clear if this is going to be a relationship built to last. Which is why, in the second game, Elena has seemingly been replaced by Chloe Fraser, a sassy Australian treasure hunter who's a master of deception and switching sides. This gives the impression that Uncharted was going to operate under Indiana Jones rules, where there's a different girl each time and the romance with the previous one will never be mentioned again. But just as the first game denied the expected trope of Elena being a damsel in distress, Among Thieves denies the girl of the week concept's presence. Elena shows up a few chapters in, jilted and annoyed at Nate's presumably non-amicable dumping of her noted in her introduction to Chloe.
Oh, Elena Fisher. Last year's model.
Not that she's allowed this breakup to define her career's kicked up a notch and she's now an investigative journalist chasing after a brutal Serbian war criminal, the same one that Nate and Chloe are chasing after in fact. Nate decides to bring them along, even though Chloe feels that they would hold them back, right up until the point where it all goes horribly wrong and Elena's cameraman is killed. It's here that Elena proves herself once again, helping the two escape from Harry Flynn and Lazarevich's goons. Once again though, Drake believes that he needs to save Elena and believes that it's his fault that she got involved.
You are so wrong. She did this all by herself. I had no clue.
Oh wait, that's the wrong clip. Sorry, let me get the right one. Okay, there we go.
Never should have got you into this mess.
You didn't. I got here on my own.
Nah. I mean, you know, the rest of it.
Oh, we knew what the stakes were.
Elena also explains Nate's own plan for him at a later point and acts as a very useful driver for him. She also tracks him down to the mountain village he ends up in when his train adventure goes horribly wrong. From here she once again serves as an able sidekick but ends up injured at the end of the game. It's this incident that helps Nate realise just how much he still cares for Elena as he worries about her potential death. Naturally, the end of the game has Chloe asking Nate if he loves Elena, and the couple once again get together with a kiss and some banter as they look out at a mountain landscape. All looks good for the happy couple now, right? Not quite. Sometime between these events and the third game, the two get married and end up separated. While Nate is off being a thief, Elena's investigative journalism takes her to Yemen, where the two are seemingly estranged. But she still wears her wedding ring because...
It helps in this part of the world.
Oh,
we don't know if that's a genuine reason or an excuse to say that she doesn't want to end the relationship, although judging from her expression at the end, in this moment...
I'm really sorry about your ring.
it's alright. I swapped it for something better.
It suggests that it was indeed an excuse. Elena doesn't get as much screen time in this game, but the moments that do exist paint an uncomfortable picture for their relationship, one that still shows attraction but also major rifts between the two. However, while Nate does seemingly abandon Elena at a crucial point when they plan to sneak onto an enemy plane, his reasoning this time is much more clearly rooted in compassion, stating that they can't both realistically sneak onto a plane, and he doesn't want to lose her again, referencing events from the end of Uncharted 2. It's a decision that does benefit Nate as she drives in to help him gain the speed he needs to get onto the plane. It's not clear, but it's possible that Nate knew exactly what Elena would do in the circumstances, and she delivered. It suggests a much stronger desire to understand her and recognise who she is and what she's capable of. The pattern to their relationship across these three games is obvious though. They are deeply attracted to each other, but it rarely holds together. In fact, it's high adventure that seems to bring them together, but it's the quiet bits in between that drive them apart. It's not until Uncharted 4 that we really start to see why that happens. Which brings us up to date. Uncharted 4 makes the step of, rather than skipping the quiet bit between the adventures, we're thrown right into the home life. An agreement has been made, one that sees Nate abandoning his grave robbing for a salvage job, while Elena is now working as a travel journalist rather than investigating wannabe dictators and hanging out in war zones. But this isn't quite marital bliss. We can see this in Nate's distraction when he looks at a picture of a tropical island on the mantelpiece, one that certainly isn't from the Assassin's Creed 4 art book. I don't know what you're talking about. Elena asks him if he's happy, which seems like her trying to get him to talk about his distraction, but it's equally possible we could read her being unhappy into the question, and that she's asking for reassurance, which kind of becomes more obvious later. This is because the game proves that she too misses the adventure. We've seen signs of it in Drake's Fortune, when she insists that the two keep going when Nate wants to drop out. And her adventures to Tibet and Yemen happened completely independently of Nate. The adventure is the thing that brings them together, after all. They come together in Drake's Fortune despite his terrible attitude towards her. She starts among thieves angry with him, but the adventure brings them together. Drake's deception shows that they'd made a go of marriage, but it fell apart, but once again, the adventure drove them back together. It's easy to assume that what we're seeing at the start of A Thief's End is the two of them falling back into that quiet period that leads to breakup. And indeed, the events of the game are breakup worthy. Nate's long-lost brother Sam shows up, asks for Nate's help, and rather than being honest with Elena, he constructs an elaborate lie. His reasoning is that she needs to be protected, but the series has proven time and again that she doesn't need this. The established fact that Nathan Drake is an idiot also applies here, because he somehow doesn't believe that an investigative journalist wouldn't check up on the facts behind his story, and she does, quite effectively, to confront him in the act. So far, it's clear that Nate and Elena aren't exactly a model couple. They've broken up multiple times and seem to get together after hooking up while high on mortal danger. It's not exactly a healthy basis for a relationship. Nate has a tendency to forget the extent of Elena's capabilities. She too shows a degree of stubbornness in the face of danger, as seen in 3 separate games before this one. The fact that she flies out to Madagascar to confront Nate in person is also a demonstration of that stubbornness. She won't accept arguing over the phone. This must be done face to face. But remember where I started by saying that real-world relationships require hardship and often result in personality clashes? Yeah, so too does this relationship. Anyway, the rest of the story here is about how that remedy was applied to this otherwise potentially toxic relationship. Uncharted 4 doesn't have them hook up in the middle of danger. Oh sure, we start leaning that way, but the journey this time is much more complex. And so the destination ends up a little bit different this time. After Elena confronts Nate in Madagascar, he spends the next few chapters regretting his decision as he heads to Libertalia with his brother. There they end up in danger, with Sam's full story revealed and Nate getting injured and left for dead. And then Elena comes back. However, she clearly isn't pleased with him. The next chapter or so, her interactions with him are tense. She half smiles at him, acts purely professionally, and makes this admission.
Thanks for saving me. Again.
I almost didn't this time.
And yet, she did. Her reasons are centered on the fact that they are married, and that the marriage vows they took sort of imply a need to look out for each other, which she also throws back at Nate by reminding him that if she could come and find him to rescue him, he could have been honest with her from the start, and that she doesn't need protecting. And so we lead to one of the most agonizing moments in the game, a long drive in silence, where the environment sounds fade out, and a soft piano piece fades in. This moment hit me in the gut when I first played it. An argument followed by a long drive where neither of them speak to one another leaves time to think. And it was here that I reflected on moments in my own relationships prior to this. And I immediately got where the couple was coming from. I got a real sense of the conflicting thoughts that must have been going through their heads. They don't communicate them to each other just yet. This doesn't happen until later, when Nate apologizes and admits that he was an idiot who was just protecting himself.
I wasn't trying to protect you. It's just, I made a promise that I was done with this life.
We both did.
Yeah, but I broke it. I didn't tell you because I was afraid.
This is the turning point. All the cockiness goes out the window, and Nate allows himself to be serious with Elena, which kind of throws back to advice that Sully gave him at the end of Uncharted 3.
You're not proposing, are you, Sully? I mean, I love you, but...
Stop. Just stop being a wise ass for 1 second.
He apologizes, and while she doesn't immediately turn back around into adoration, she accepts the apology. And I also really love this line here.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
Because while this sounds like they're discussing the next leg of the journey to help Sam, the use of it in this conversation makes it more like they have a lot to talk about when things get back on track. The next leg of the journey is where they fall back into their old habits. They go on an adventure together, digging up piratical secrets. They help each other out, and quite unsurprisingly, the adventure brings them back together, as it always has done. The key moment of this is when they discover the pirate captains. In his excitement over the find, Nate starts rambling on about the pirates and the history of what happened in the room. Meanwhile, Elena just watches him. Her expression is hard to read, but there's a glimmer of something. She's enamored with him while he's doing this. She realizes that he seems more alive now than he has in their home life, and what's more, that's kind of what she finds attractive about him. Proof that this is a realization for her shows up repeatedly from here on out. They banter more, including this exchange thrown back to the first game.
Nice romantic lighting, huh?
You have a funny idea of romantic.
Yes, I do.
And of course, following some intense danger, they share a moment of intimacy. They joke with each other, they cuddle, and they end with...
Anyone ever tell you you have a funny idea of romantic?
Yeah, I may have heard that somewhere before.
Good talk.
Good talk.
Their relationship has been salvaged, but is it the adventure again? And is it sustainable this time? At the end of the game, yes, Elena cracked the code to a successful relationship, and if the adventure is what draws them together time and again, they need to do something to maintain that, but preferably one that doesn't throw them into harsh life or death situations every couple of years. She buys the salvage company Nate works for, and they start a new life travelling the world digging for treasure, but this time through legal channels. And judging by their daughter at the very end of the game, they very much lived happily ever after. I've heard some mixed opinions on how this story plays out. I'm a fan of the realistic portrayal of a serious relationship here, but others disagree. Among the critiques are the fact that Nate doesn't throw some big grand gesture to win his girl back, or that the opening scenes were needlessly slow. I've also seen the criticism that Nate should have just told Elena, and well, yeah, the game kinda makes that clear, and it's one of the central conflicts.
With all that you two have been through together,
She wouldn't understand this.
you are not giving her enough credit.
I can't take that chance.
The thing is, the pacing at the start of the story highlights the problems. Again, we don't normally get to see what drives the couple apart between games. This time, we do. And the fact that it's slow and mundane is the point. We're here for the adventure, but so too are the couple sitting on the sofa pretending that they're not. It serves to highlight just how important the adventure is to these two being together. The problems between them happen in bedrooms and living rooms. The reconciliation happens on a deadly pirate island full of exploding mummies. This is who they are, and who they'll always be. As for Nate's lack of a grand gesture, I'm going to assume that those making that critique have never been in a serious relationship, because women aren't prizes to be won with a grand gesture. Women are people with complex feelings and thoughts, just like men. I know, it's shocking, but it's true. And disagreements, lies, and deception within a relationship can't generally be solved with a quick trip to the local shop to buy some flowers. There's no magic wand you can wave to make a relationship work. You have to work to make it work. If the games are contemporary to their releases, then these two have known each other for 10 years, and have been married for at least half that time. We see throughout the series they frequently have callbacks and in-jokes. In Uncharted 3 they joke about parachuting into the enemy colony, referencing the events of Uncharted 1.
You do realize that means parachuting in, right?
We've done it before.
Not well.
Uncharted 4 ends with a playful argument that brings a scale of 1 to 10 into play, just like the ending of Uncharted 2.
I could play for it.
Seriously?
No, listen, I have been practicing. I'm getting good.
No.
My hand-eye is way better than it used to be. Really?
I cannot do that to you again.
Are you afraid to play me?
I am so not afraid
On a
to
scale
play
of
you.
1 to 10, how scared are you to play me?
Like a 3.
Yeah, well, jack that up to like 11.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how scared were you that I was gonna die?
4.
4?
Yeah, why?
A 4.
Yeah.
You were at least an 8.
An 8?
You were a total 8.
An 8? Those guardian things were an 8.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, those were terrifying.
What's a 10?
Clowns?
Clowns over my death?
I hate
Clowns?
clowns. I hate clowns.
And the fact that Sully's
You two got a funny idea of romantic.
shows up twice in Uncharted 4, plus Elena's frequent use of cowboy as a nickname for Nate, shows a couple with history and connection. The sort of relationship you don't just casually toss aside the kind of relationship you want to try and make work, but it's also the kind of relationship that is complex and needs complex solutions to keep going. Nate does atone for his sins. He apologizes, he acknowledges his flaws, he recognizes Elena's excellence, but it's a series of micro moments, not one singular grand gesture, and in real life that is the only way to repair a broken relationship. You work at it, you correct course, you acknowledge your flaws and own up to your mistakes, and reconnecting over the things that brought you together in the first place helps a lot too. And the game acknowledging that makes its relationship story one of the finest, most mature attempts at relationship writing in video games. Of course, this isn't a relationship story that the player has a lot of agency in. Much of it happens in cutscenes while the actual gameplay focuses on jumping and shooting and raiding tombs. It's a story that works because it doesn't get boiled down to mechanics, but it's also not one that necessarily needs to be told in games. But it's a start. It's a foundation for an attempt to show a real human relationship in the fiction of video games, and many other developers could learn a lot from it. We see the couple grow across the 4 games that tell their story, with them referencing their history and with character growth within a messy and complicated relationship. It helps create genuine affection where games would normally struggle. Games are getting better at this though, but we still have some way to go. If writing like this can be integrated into gameplay more in future without boiling relationship down to items on a quest checklist, we could see the medium mature even further. And at the end of the day, isn't that the real treasure that we're all seeking?